exists in complacency and action here in our world. This year, in 2013, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of several milestone events in the civil rights movement.
Right.
Among them, King's authorship of Letter from Birmingham Jail and the March on Washington. On Good Friday, in April of 1963, King was arrested for marching in protest against the conditions of racial discrimination in Birmingham's downtown business district. Months later, in August of 1963, King led a historic March on Washington where he brought the discriminatory conditions here in the Deep South to the forefront of the world's attention.
Yeah.
King was a product of his time. Yeah. But more so, he was a product of his environment. His attempts to challenge the status quo were not as a radical outsider, but instead as a Christian minister who was called to social action. King studied civil disobedience of Henry David Thoreau. King studied the social gospel of Walter Rauschenbusch and the Christian ethics of Reinhold Niebuhr. When you put those things together, my brothers and sisters, you get someone with a perspective like our late sister from here in Mississippi, Fannie Lou Hammond. He was tired of being sick and tired. For King, therefore, his duty as a Christian minister was to imitate the actions of Jesus the Christ, the preacher from Galilee, because the time was now. Let me give you a visual. I love to use this visual in preaching, a visual of the Christian cross. As a preacher of the social gospel, King wrote about the two planes of Christianity, the two planes of the cross. The vertical plane of the cross is about the individual's salvation, the individual's salvic relationship with the divine. That's wonderful. Jesus died for us so we could all go to heaven. And that's a wonderful thing. I thank you, Jesus. But guess what? Jesus also lived. Jesus also taught us communalism. Jesus also taught us do unto others as we would have them do unto you. Jesus felt that because his time was now. That's the evidence of the social gospel.
Yes, sir.
The social gospel is still in action. We talked about it yesterday, Bishop, when we talked about Bethel AME Church in Tallahassee, Florida, doing communal outreach through community development corporations. It's time for AME churches here in the 8th District to do much of the same thing. Reach out and serve our communities because Christ didn't just die, Christ lived too. There's no time to wait. We can't wait. The time is now. As you accept the challenge of a gospel-oriented call to action, I urge you to remember that Dr. King lived in his time, but we live in our time. This past week, I talked to several people who wanted to organize marches for Brother Trayvon Martin. Forgive me for pointing out the sad but obvious truth. Brother Martin is gone, and he is not coming back. Marching in American culture is to bring attention to a problem where people don't necessarily know about. In this day and age, if you don't know racial profiling exists each and every day of the week and twice on Sunday, there's something really wrong.
I see you.
Let me give you some bad news. George Zimmerman was acquitted after a jury trial. That means you can appeal a verdict all you want, but the chances of an appellate court reversing a decision from a jury of his peers are 0 to none. It's not going to happen. My point is this: if you want Brother Trayvon Martin's death to not be in vain, let's use his death as motivation to ensure something like that never happens again. So if you want to have a public march with some of the young people here and take them to the law school that's closest in your community and tell them you can make a difference in the judicial system. Go be a prosecutor. Ensure that somebody like George Zimmerman never goes free for the crime he committed again. If you're going to march, bring people's attention to the faith-based and community service partnership programs that funnel millions of dollars into churches all across the world. And those dollars go unapplied for because we don't know. So if you're going to march, have a march to bring that kind of attention. Have a march to talk about feeding programs that we can do in our church to reach out in the community. I ain't telling you what I think I know.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm telling you what I know I know.
Preach up.
If you're going to march, then, my brothers and sisters, march to bring attention to the systematic inequalities that exist in public education. Demand better schools in our community because we just can't take the status quo anymore. Each and every year, the U.S. Department of Education releases its rankings, and they always have Louisiana at 49.
I know that's right.
And you know what we say in Louisiana? Thank God for Mississippi. Time out to the dumb stuff. Time out. We don't have time to waste. We can't waste another generation. There's something, my brothers and sisters, listen to me now. This is a call to action. There's something that sounds good about Richard Allen Charter Academy. There's something that sounds good about the Daniel Alexander Charter School of Excellence. What I'm trying to say is if you're going to march, if you want to bring some attention, bring some action. The time is now. We can't wait. The time is now.
Now. I hear you, son.
My mother used to tell me when I was a little boy that there's a difference between ignorant and stupid.
He wasn't in the class this morning. He wasn't even in the class this morning. Must be trying to tell us something.
Cure ignorance with information. Stupid, on the other hand, is when you know better and you choose to be ignorant.
Go ahead.
If we look at the text, Paul doesn't want us to be ignorant.
That's right.
Paul writes that he doesn't want us to be uninformed. He's letting us know that time is short. He also encourages us by sharing that God has destined us for wrath. God has not destined us for wrath, but destined us for salvation. According to the text, Paul is giving us an urgency of now to take advantage of the time God has given us so that we may receive salvation. Now let me get theological for a moment. Paul is not calling us to earn salvation. We can't earn it. It's the unmerited gift from God. You can't pay for it. God gave it to us through the death of his son, Jesus the Christ. In the words of St. Athanasius, the debt has been paid by the God-man. As Methodists, we believe in concepts like prevenient grace, like sanctifying grace, and like justifying grace. So if you're going to fulfill God's great commission, go forward with an urgency of now.
Yes, sir.
Just as the text shows us that God is a God that will allow us time to get things in order, the text also teaches us in our lives that God has given us a gift, and we have to make the most of the opportunities God has given. In other words, the time is now. Here's a true story. Several years ago, when I was preparing to start seminary, a minister who shall remain nameless said to me, "Augustine, don't go over there to the cemetery, a seminary, and lose your religion. I got mine the old-fashioned way. I got it down on my knees." I get that. And I also get that that particular minister has served God's people, but he is a reflection of his time. I am a reflection of my time. I got mine on my knees too, but I got mine also in an accredited laboratory where I studied liberation hermeneutics, biblical exegesis, and advanced homiletics. This is my time. I got mine on my knees too, but I also got mine by putting those things I learned in the academic laboratory to practice with the practical application of pastoral ministry. This is my time. I got mine on my knees too, but I also got mine by being in school full-time, working a secular job full-time, and serving God's people full-time. That's a whole lot of time, y'all. We working the time. I am a reflection of my time, and this is the time in which God has called me to minister. He wrote about a special time in his life. He called it the midnight cup of coffee.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
King was awakened by phone callers who threatened to bomb his house and kill his wife and children because of the work he was doing in the civil rights movement. At that moment, when Dr. King sat at his kitchen table and had that midnight cup of coffee, he let go and let God. And because of that particular time, he writes that his ministry flourished.
Yes, sir.
I can't speak with any particular sense of personal certainty about a midnight cup of coffee. But
Go ahead.
on behalf of my brothers in ministry, Reverend Demetrius Phillips, Reverend Kerry James, Reverend Earl Robinson, Reverend Keith Sanders, and Reverend Robert Johnson, I can, however, speak about a 5 o'clock in the morning cup of coffee because I'm trying to complete a reflection paper opposed to an online module before I got to go to work. I can't talk with any certainty about a midnight cup of coffee, but I can talk with personal familiarity about a 6 o'clock in the morning cup of coffee when I'm trying to reconcile concepts I learned in systematic theology with my own belief system.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I can talk about a 7 o'clock in the morning cup of coffee when I'm rushing to wake this young lady up. I can speak to that with certainty, my brothers and sisters, because one thing's for sure, she's not going to call me a Pauline scholar, she's not going to call me reverend, she's not going to call me attorney, she's going to say daddy.
Go ahead.
So what I'm trying to say is on behalf of those brothers that I named, I can mention this is our time, the ministry in which we live, trying to put together all those things in make time.
Yes, go ahead now.
What I'm trying to say is that it's a different time when daddy drops daughter off at 8 o'clock in the morning and I got to be at my desk by 8:15, no later than 8:20. I can't lose this job now. Elder, my church is depending on me to tithe. If I don't tithe, we don't make our budget. The time is now.
Go ahead,
Special about using and making the most of the time God has given you. That's part of the grace in our lives. That's part of the grace that God gives us. Now watch this. Here we are in Mississippi. And I love me some Mississippi. M.I. crooked letter, I love Mississippi. Right? In 1955, yes, sir. Right here in Mississippi,
right here,
people got together in uproar because a young black man named Emmett Till.
Right here. Yeah.
Last night in this very room, I got together with some people who were in uproar because of the Trayvon Martin verdict. Because another young black man who was killed, his killer would go free. Remember the old saying, don't get mad, get even? I got one better for our young people. Don't get mad, go to law school. If you want to take advantage
you got it. That's right.
Understand that the criminal justice system can't be changed by you watching CNN or court TV. You got to get off the bench and get into the game. Any lawyer who's tried a couple of cases won't be surprised by a jury verdict. You know you win or lose a case during voir dire, the process called jury selection, where you say, I ain't telling you what I think I know. I'm telling you what I know I know. In other words, I don't know what I'm saying, but I'm just saying what I'm saying. As we approach the 50th anniversary of these milestones, remember, we can't go back and cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge again and ask for the right to vote. But what we can do is try to carpool and get people registered to vote. What we can do is try to make sure people get to the polls on election day. It makes a difference. It made a difference in 2008. It made a difference in 2012. Just as the person that sits at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the Honorable Barack Obama. Obama might have said, yes, we can. Today, I just say, this is our time, and the time is now. God's grace and God's movement in our lives gives us an opportunity to get it right and to do the work that God has called us to do. But we don't have time to waste. That's what Paul is teaching us, my brothers and sisters. There is an urgency of now. The time is now for each of us to use the gifts God has given us to be the best we can be. So young people, if you're going to be a lawyer, you can't be Thurgood Marshall. That was his time. But in this time, you can go out and find justice the best you can on behalf of your client. If I'm going to be a writer, I don't want to write like Paul from Tarsus. That was his time. If I'm going to be a preacher, I don't want to preach like Martin from Atlanta. That was his time. I just want to be Jay from Baton Rouge. And I want to do the best I can in my time. What I'm trying to say, my brothers and sisters, is God has given us the gifts, and it's time for all of us to get our boogie on. It's time for all of us to use the gifts God has given us to glorify God's precious name. We ain't got time to waste. We got to get up and get it going now. Some of my homeboys from New Orleans, a rap group, the Big Timers. The Big Timers had a song where they talked about get your roll on. Get your roll on when you use the gifts God has given you to glorify God's precious name. The athletes made it popular. You remember Dante Culpepper? Football games on Sundays? What I'm trying to say is get your roll on for Jesus. Do what God has called you to do. You don't have time to waste. The time is now. There's a sense of urgency. That's what Paul is teaching us. The time is now, my brothers and sisters, not tomorrow. Tomorrow might not come. Now